Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll notice I'm wearing a Los Spurs shirt today, and it's in honor of the Spurs getting the Victor Wembanyama pick. It's also in honor of my colleague and friend Carrie Clack, who suggested on Facebook that we needed to talk on the podcast, and we will. Trust me, in the coming weeks, you're going to think this is like a Spurs. This is like the second Spurs podcast for the Express News. But I think in San Antonio, we're still kind of on the Wemby high. It rained a lot over the weekend, but it felt sunny for a lot of us. And so anyway, like I said, I just wanted to kind of pay tribute to that. Really excited today to have two special guests. Delia Garcia, who is the youngest elected member of the Kansas legislature in history, also served as the Secretary of Labor in Kansas and now works for the U.S. Labor Department. And she has a book out called Latina Leadership Lessons, 50 Latinas Speak. And we'll talk in a minute about where the special book signing is going to be. And one of the 50 Latinas that is featured in the book is Laura Barberena, who is a San Antonio political consultant. And listeners of Puro Politics will know her very well because you've been a frequent guest. Yes. And thanks to both of you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for so glad to be here. And go Spurs, go.
Yeah, go Spurs.
Let's just be clear. Go Spurs, go.
Yeah, let's.
All right, we got that out.
Now we can talk.
Yeah, we need to get that out of the way first. I agree with you all. Delia, I want to talk a little bit about, there's a lot in your own story that I'm really interested in, but I want to talk a little bit about where the idea came from. Because as soon as Laura made me aware of it, I thought, well, this makes perfect sense. It's, it's the kind of thing, I have an 18-year-old daughter. I would love for her to read this. But where did the idea come from?
So the idea, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's awesome to be with you today. The idea came from watching the news and seeing the importance of highlighting and uplifting leadership, in particular women in leadership. Also, my own frustration of seeing certain things happening that I don't agree with that's happening in our world. And I know the people who can change it are women leaders, and particularly women I know in this book. So I thought, let me just write the book and to do three things: to uplift the current leadership or the people who have paved the way, current leadership, to empower current leadership, and to grow and inspire new leaders.
How hard was it to you picked 50? How hard was it to decide on the 50? And I mean, was everybody that you approached, were they all able to do it?
Well, I'll say I started doing this during the pandemic, and so a lot was going on. A lot of, I think, in a reflection of many people. I actually asked more than 50, but I had to just stop at 50 because I was like, okay, I have more than 50 friends. But I thought it was important to get different regions. So there's 25 states represented, 3 generations, various industry backgrounds. So I just wanted to get a piece of a national snapshot of what Latina leadership looks like.
And I'm going to piggyback off what she said. 50. I have more than 50 friends because quite literally everyone in this book is her friend because she has an enormous network.
It's amazing.
And she's just built it, starting as a young legislator, just traveling across the country. I mean, I would always, when I ran into someone in D.C., I would be like, I bet you know my friend Delia. And everybody like, oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Because she really does. I mean, these are not just leaders, they're personal friends. She has relationships with all of these women, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, you, as I mentioned, you got elected at the age of 27 to the Kansas legislature.
Yes.
First Latina elected there. I read somewhere that your father had an interest in running for political office, and I guess he never had the opportunity to do that. Was he encouraging you at a young age to consider this?
I'd say my entire family. I grew up in the oldest family-owned Mexican restaurant in Kansas. So my grandparents are really involved in the community, both my father's side with my uncle who worked for president.
And your family owned this restaurant?
Yes. We just celebrated 60 years last month. And so it's been in our blood, service, whether it be customer service at the restaurant or, my grandparents hosted Jimmy Carter when he was running for president. So we've been very involved in my father's side. My uncle worked for Senator Dole, President Reagan. So it's been all over. So that public service has been very strong. My father's very involved in unions, SEIU, and so all of our family is involved in all politics, and I would say more so public service.
It seemed, to me, I think about when I was 27 and I had no idea about anything really, and I just to me the decision to make that bold leap to run at that age, much less win, is kind of astonishing to me. And so, what gave you because a lot of what your book is dealing with is people having the confidence,
yes.
And sort of a sense of direction to be able to do these kinds of things. Where did it come from for you?
Well, first and foremost, my family. But as far as women leaders, Gloria Molina, who's also in the book, who recently passed last week, she was a first Latina elected in the California legislature. And when I was 16, I saw her on TV from Kansas. There was Proposition 187 going on, and she was talking out against it. And I was just so enamored, wow, I see myself in her. And then in 2 seconds, I was like, but that would never happen in Kansas. Fast forward, I then come here to San Antonio, and I was attending St. Mary's University in 2003, and then worked for Senator Leticia Vanderpute. So, of course, I was able to be every day around.
What was that experience like?
Oh, my gosh, so great. I got to see and touch and learn every day how she moved, how she treated her staff, how I should treat my staff. She was one of the people that when I was trying to decide to run, I was so scared. I cried, I prayed, I talked to everybody. She was one of the main ones. And she helped she didn't tell me what to do. She just gave me great things to think about.
My sense from her, just from the little time that I spent in her office in Austin years ago, was that, she had high expectations for her staff. She demanded a lot, but also had a way of sort of, keeping a very sort of positive sort of spirit in the office. I don't know if that was your experience.
Inspiring, leadership all the way. Did everything with intention and love. And always in a teaching way, and always was grateful. I worked around some people who were not grateful and didn't say thank you. She always would say thank you and show she led by model.
Laura,
yes.
I did not know until a few minutes ago, until just before we started, that you worked on Delia's first campaign.
Yes.
Had you all met in San Antonio when Delia was going to college here?
We met in San Antonio, and I think at the time I'd been helping Senator Vanderpute with her campaigns at that time, and we met. I think I might have been attending St. Mary's at that time as well. So just sort of mutual circles. And I have this, you should run. You've got this amazing thing. Let's do it. Let's do it. And she was afraid. And I was like, let's go. Let's design the logo.
Were you a little, I know from talking to you over the years that, you've now worked on a lot of races outside of the state of Texas, in Georgia and other places. Yes. But I'm not sure at that point how much you had. Were you intimidated at all by you're dealing with a state that's very different from Texas.
It's funny. The first campaign I ever worked on was a presidential campaign. So I kind of came into politics the opposite way. So, so the first campaigns I was actually directing President Clinton in commercials. So I kind of worked my way down, I'd say. But the local races are so much more gratifying. You get to be with the candidates every single day, and you get to feel and learn and talk to constituents and see what the community needs to be able to really affect change. When you're dealing with presidential politics, it's a lot of lawyers, So it's really nice to be able to be involved in these kinds of races. And, a lot of the issues, especially when you're looking at state ledge, there are a lot of similar issues that are going across in the states. And I honestly don't even remember. It's been a while, girl. I don't remember some of the issues that we were running on, but I know she knocked on a lot of doors. Yes, I did. She knocked on a lot of doors, which we know is really important in terms of winning these kinds of races.
Delia, in your introduction to the book, you talk about battling imposter syndrome and about maybe the tendency amongst some Latinas to maybe be overly self-deprecating or maybe excessively polite in situations. Is this something that you think that our culture has just sort of imposed on Latinas?
Yes and no. Not only our culture, but our everyday lives. Living in Kansas and in Washington, D.C., that's happening too, and it's not culture. Yeah. But definitely growing up, yes, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to have kids. And I'm one of 5 daughters, and I would always be like, okay, yeah, but not right now. And then let's talk about this. And then also showing my nieces and nephews and sisters, like, it's okay to try a different path. And we can still do that. And we all have done different things. And so it's yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember, we did, I invited you to be a guest. You were my guest at Texas A&M, and we did a whole session on imposter syndrome. It was you, District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, and Pat Wallace.
I do remember that. That was really interesting.
Yeah, and because for me, that's definitely been a part of my experience is having that imposter syndrome, going through a PhD program where I am the only person of color that was in the program at UT Austin, and sort of carrying that, like, do I belong in this space? Am I smart enough to?
Do I have to apologize for
and you
whatever?
Being at Harvard, like, the young guy out of the valley going to Harvard. I mean, these are, and you shared some really personal and really great things at that session, and I think it's important that we address that and recognize that we have these feelings and it's okay. But to move past them, right? To understand that we do have a right to be in this space. And that, I think, is why this book is so important to me, is that it's allowing a space for our stories, our leadership lessons to be told. Because we've never really had the opportunity to do that in a way that could actually be introduced into school curriculums. I might be letting something out of the bag here. But
is there something? Okay, something happening on the?
Yes. So here in Texas, it'll be starting here, and we'll be kicking it off and announcing that on June 9th at the book signing here.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So exciting stuff.
Laura, I wondered, because of the way the book is structured, you have 10 lessons or pieces of advice from each of the Latina leaders. Wondered how difficult it was for you to narrow that down. It felt to me like you had some of them. It was like a combination of like maybe almost like mental health advice. Just to dance as much as you can, laugh as much as you can. Which these are things that I think are valuable to anybody. And then just some things about which I think is. My dad always said this, like about making sure you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are. I mean, he ingrained that in me like at an early age. That's really important. And not everyone can handle being around people who maybe know more than they do.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. I actually had 11.
You did? Okay.
My 11 was called pilon, which in Spanish is extra. And the whole that pilon was always do a pilon, right? Always go that extra. Yeah. But it didn't make it into the book because I think they figured if we give her a pilon, we're going to have to give everyone a pilon.
That was the tough part. People had like a lot to say. And I'm like, oh.
It was tough. It was tough. But and just narrowing it down, like, my first draft, I think I came up with 20. So it was like, how do we narrow this down? And interestingly enough, even as I narrowed it down, like there are certain themes that you see across the book,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of, sort of cultural references like dale ganas, right? And I talk about ojo. I mean, there's a lot of cultural aspects that you're not going to see in a book on leadership coming from a white woman or from corporate America, right? Like this is very unique to the experience of being Latina, and I think that's what also makes the books really special.
Delia, I was thinking, are there things that you think about that Delia in 2023 would have you wish would have been able to impart through time travel or some other means?
Hot tub time travel.
Exactly.
Time travel. Let's be clear.
Sure. Yeah.
We're going to time travel. We're going to time travel. We might as well do it in a hot tub.
To the 2004 Delia running for political office for the first time. What are the things that that now that you wish you would have been able to?
And, I think a couple come to mind. So one, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's scary for where I'm trembling, where it brings me to tears, where I can't even breathe. And then I think also asking for help. I'm not good at that. I'm becoming better at that. And literally, I was going through like a crappy moment about a month ago, and one of the ladies in the book, and that's the beauty of it is I'm reading my own, lessons and other people's. She's like, look at page da-da-da. She's like, ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And it was that beautiful reminder of like, it's okay to ask for help.
Where do you think that reluctance, and I have that it's been something I've struggled with, all my life, to the willingness to ask for help. But where do you think that comes from?
A second ago, you talked about the cultural piece. And I think, growing up with in a very traditional Mexican family and Catholic, and so it's like triple that responsibility. I think that's a piece of it, but also this like pressures from the society of like, you have to do this or women aren't enough. We're always feeling second class. And then add another, other 2 layers to that. But being able to navigate using some of these lessons. Another big one that's been very evident for myself in these last few months recently is the health piece. All the 50 women, many of them haven't met each other, but they pretty much put at the high top list, probably the top 3, is, your health, self-care, self-love. I like to call it the sana colita de rana. It's like, being endearing and caring for yourself when, just stop. The work is always going to be there. Go for a walk. I do that now. I didn't do that then. I've lost weight. I've been better at my weight now. I've been better with my eating habits and meditation. I didn't do that then. Mm-hmm. That's the difference.
Now you're working for the U.S. Department of Labor, and you're basically living along the I-35 corridor in the this part of Texas. What kind of work are you doing for the department right now?
So currently, I'm the administrator for the Women's Bureau at the United States Department of Labor. So basically, women workers, making sure their economic security is supported. Also, opening the doors for apprenticeships. In so many spaces, we had all this money pass through with the CHIP, all these federal monies, and now these are going to the states. And when they're looking for women workers, sometimes they say we don't know where they're at. We don't know where they're women construction. Women apprenticeships, so making sure that they're connected, making sure that women, when they are in these non-traditional spaces, that they feel safe. And so that's what we're doing nationwide.
And you're looking, you said 8 states?
8 states, yes.
Right now we're going through a period, and it's not necessarily new, but it seems to have intensified this kind of backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're seeing in Texas and other red states, against these programs and college campuses and so on. And I think really against maybe the concept of diversity as something that really is valuable, or that the idea that representation is valuable. And I think, at the core of what your book's about is the idea that representation is important. That it's, and if you could talk a little bit about why you think that this is something that is crucial.
Well, representation matters. Like in this book, it's like I can see myself, and I want others to see themselves. If this book inspires one person to do something good and maybe be president of the United States or the next political strategist or whatever, the purpose of this book has been accomplished. I've been in spaces like in Kansas and D.C. and Texas and nationwide of always being sometimes the youngest person in the room, the only woman, and being able to still feel confident in that. When I do see myself in another boardroom, I take the time to go over there and learn. If I don't see myself, then the person who reciprocates, and I feel seen, I go to that person too and create a relationship, and making sure that we create those spaces where, because absolutely representation matters, whether it's people of color, whether women, age, and I want to make sure every time I think about this, I think about my abuelita, who she didn't speak English when she first came, and I'm sorry, I get choked up. When she can navigate, somebody can navigate, something like that. That's the important piece, to be able to have that. Yeah. So to be able to create that is something that I want to be intentional about on creating leaders.
And I just want to add to that while this is Latina focused, it's not just for Latinas, right? Like this should be, when a white CEO writes a leadership book, it's not just for white CEOs, right? Like these are leadership lessons that all of us can learn, right? And that's the beautiful, wonderful thing about diversity is we're bringing a perspective to this space that's not really heard often. These voices are not heard enough, and we totally want these lessons to be appropriated by anyone who will take them.
There's something, even if they're coming from a particular perspective, they're pretty universal, I think, as far as things that.
And to begin that conversation about what is our role here to pass on the knowledge that we've learned, right? To have this conversation like, Gilbert, does this inspire you to want to figure out what do you need to pass on to the next generation of journalists, right? Like, what do you need to teach that next generation that's going to make them make this world a better place?
Yeah. And the world of journalism is struggling with these same ideas about representation and diversity, because that's been a chronic problem. Absolutely. Were there suggestions or lessons in the book that surprised you? The things that you didn't necessarily, that it wouldn't have occurred to you that somebody would have suggested?
No, actually, and all in all, when I would read it, and again, I would love to write a book about writing the book, because receiving each one of the women, and actually when I would talk many of them said, "Are you sure you want me to?" I'm like, "Yes, you're badass." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, chingona." Like, yes, you need to be in this book.
I think chingona is actually worse than badass.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, wait, no. Hey, I think we're. Monty, are we okay on that? I think we're all right.
But no, I think it is. We just need to hear it. We need to be reminded and feel empowered. And again, creating that circle of love, mentors, all of it. Like, it really isn't rocket science, but I think we just need to hear it. And when we hear it from people that look like us and are like us, it matters even more.
Now, I know you have, Laura, you have former Senator Van de Putte, Frankie Gonzalez-Wolf, also from San Antonio, and is the subject of a really interesting documentary that recently aired on public television, looking at Frankie's attempt to run for city council in 2019, an attempt to become the first openly transgender individual elected to office in Texas. You have Lena Hidalgo from Houston.
Mm-hmm. We also have Patricia Mejia. Patricia Mejia, she's with the San Antonio Area Foundation doing amazing, literally transforming the way philanthropy is done here in San Antonio. And you can see that change that she's made in this community. So she's an amazing individual.
Yeah.
Embodies that representation we're talking about.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I did get the information and about the book signing, which is going to be happening in San Antonio. This is Friday, June 9th, 6 to 8 p.m. at Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center Latino Bookstore,
yes,
1300 Guadalupe Street. Delia, Laura, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. And like when Laura and I were talking about it last week, we were again talking about the idea that this is something I was going to look at it first for the podcast, but I'm definitely passing it on to my daughter, and I think it's
and capturing these stories like Delia mentioned. Gloria Molina, who literally was a trailblazer, and for folks who don't know her, she was the first Latina ever elected to LA City Council, like LA's county commissioner, which is essentially their commissioner's court. She just passed, but we have her ideas forever to pass on. And I think that's a really important thing, to be able to capture these stories and be able to pass them on.
Had you seen another book? I'm trying to think of another one that's similar to this.
Not this focus, no, because I've read many leadership books, but not like this, which is another reason why I wrote it. And learning in life that life is not linear. It's curvy like me. So I'm going to embrace that and show that it's all cool.
And we're super proud that the Lotus Huerta wrote the foreword to it.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
She's a great mentor.
Yeah. So did you, how did that go when you approached her about that?
Oh, she's like, you're finally doing it.
Finally.
So, yeah.
Yeah, she's finally, yes, because she pushes us, or Delia, a lot to do things. And besides Delia giving her earrings, we have this joke that every time Dolores, we're around her, she's forgotten her earrings. So Delia takes off her earrings and gives them to her. And so she's like, that's like the 6th pair I've given her. So.
And it's like Selena, anything for Selena, anything for Dolores. But she's been there for me in the times I cried on this state legislative house floor, and I'm like, don't know how to vote.
What an icon. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Delia, Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, we'll be back next week. Hope you all are doing well, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.